All right, well, my name is Chris, and yes, I am from America, and I grew up in Oregon, which is a state on the west coast, just above California and below Washington, if you're not familiar. Portland, Oregon is kind of one of the famous places in Oregon, and I was about 45 minutes south of that. Grew up in a little town called Dexter, Oregon, which most people have never heard of because it's a tiny little town with one post office and 5 bars, I think. So that was not much to it. Welcome to the Apologetics class today. I'm excited to get started and kind of get into this and see what you guys think about apologetics and maybe some things that you've learned over the years as well. So let's get started here. So in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, it talks about defending our faith. So this is a pretty popular verse when talking about apologetics. So someone want to read that for us real quick? Who can read nice and loud for us? Go for it.
But in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always be prepared to make defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect.
Yeah, how many of you have seen that verse before? Anybody seen that one before? Yeah. It's a great one. So this verse reminds me, 1, that Jesus is Lord. I'm not. And 2, I should be prepared to give answers to others. And then 3, always be respectful and kind when doing so. I think that's really, really important. Because we can often get so excited about something that we found in the Bible or something about our faith, and we can end up hitting people over the heads like with a 2x4 with our excitement. And the whole goal is to get them to know who Jesus is and that they would come to a saving knowledge in Him. And if you do that in an angry way or a way that's offensive, you're less likely to be successful. Best way is, when you're defending your faith, is to understand that you don't have it all figured out. Right? That we don't, and neither do they. They don't have it all figured out either. We're all on a journey of faith and trying to figure out why we are here, what our purpose is, where do we come from, is there really a God, is the Bible true, all these questions that kind of come to you and come to others as you're thinking about life on earth. So in this next 40 minutes, we're going to be going on this journey together, and we'll talk about how I came to my current understanding. We'll define what apologetics actually means, not making a bunch of apologies, but what actually means there. And then where can I go for more information, and what can I do about it? So that's kind of our time together. So let me tell you a little bit about me. So I grew up in a non-Christian home for probably the first 6 years of my life. Both my parents grew up Christian, but they were not living a recognizable Christian life in that first little bit. In fact, they were hippies, and there was a lot of interesting things that happened in my household growing up. But the first time I heard about Jesus was actually through a Bible release program at my school. There were some kids going across the street and coming back with prizes during lunchtime, and I was like, I want prizes. So I went over to check it out with my brother, and he and I heard about Jesus and did not know who he was, never been told about him before. And so that night when we came home, my dad came home, and he was an alcoholic, so he came home drunk, and we were having dinner, and my brother looked at my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, who's Jesus?" And my dad, changed completely, stood up, walked out of the room, came back and brought a Bible with him that he had from his grandpa, and he began to teach us about who Jesus was right there at the dinner table. And my brother and I and my sister all accepted Jesus within the next couple of days, and our life completely changed. My dad ended up becoming a pastor. And so when I think about the power of the Bible, I realize that it can change lives, that it can absolutely affect who you are as a person, and it can change your entire future and eternity. So I started going to camp in Oregon, and I realized that I could read the Bible and that I could live a life for Jesus as I watched others doing that. And I went to church, and I learned about the importance of good biblical teaching. My dad learned the Greek and read the original version of the Bible that was in Greek and would translate that into English while he would teach when he was a pastor. And so I got to hear direct translation into English, which was really cool. And then as I got to school, I began to have things that was challenging my faith. Maybe you guys have experienced this. I had people that were in my biology class talking about evolution and talking about how atoms were held together by cosmic glue, when I had heard in the Bible that everything was held together by Christ, and he's the one that brings everything together. Well, as I got a little bit older and started working, I was driving and commuting to work, and I started listening to the radio, and there was a guy on the radio that was called the Bible Answer Man. And you could call in with any question you want, and within a few seconds, he would have a biblical answer for you. And I was always amazed at how well he knew the Bible, and that he could find these answers so quick, and I wanted to be like that. Somebody introduced to me a book called The Case for Christ. Anybody ever heard of that book, The Case for Christ, by Lee Strobel? I read that book, and it revolutionized my brain. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that there was this much evidence about the Bible and about Jesus' resurrection and all these things that I could actually talk to maybe a scientist-type friend of mine, and it would make sense to them. And it was like logical, besides the fact that I just believed in it. There was actual, it made sense. I had a science teacher friend of mine. He and I were both science teachers, and we would sit at lunchtime and chat about these kind of things. He was an agnostic, meaning he didn't know if there was a God or not an atheist where he says, no, there's no God, but he wasn't a Christian and didn't quite believe, but he was curious. And he would ask questions. And based on my reading of The Case for Christ and the Bible Answer Man, I was able to give him a few things that I learned along the way that really helped me to understand my own faith. And after I left that school, I actually went into full-time ministry to work at another Christian camp in Washington. And he called me up that summer and he said, hey, guess what? I'm a Christian. And I was like, what? You've got to be kidding me. He goes, yeah, I just wanted to thank you for all those conversations that we had over lunchtime and made a huge difference in my life. Thank you. And I was like, whoa. You don't often get to hear the difference that your conversations are going to make in somebody's life. There might be 25 people that talk to somebody before they come to Christ, and maybe you're only number 1, or maybe you're number 5, maybe you're number 24. I think I was number 24 in Aaron's life because he met a godly Christian woman, ended up marrying her, and that's how he came to the Lord through her. And so that was pretty exciting. So then along comes the internet. I know it seems like the internet's always been here, but it hasn't been. And when I was growing up, I was about 12 when the internet first came on. But when I started searching, I actually became a pastor. I was a children and an adult education pastor in Washington at a church called MBC, kind of like Matamata Bible College or Matamata Bible Church and Baptist Church. There's 2 MBCs, right? So this was Memorial Bible Church in Washington, and I was tasked with getting the curriculum for the Sunday school classes and for Vacation Bible School, and for our Awanas program, the evening Wednesday night programs. And so I began searching for some curriculum that would give us some apologetics type teaching, and I found Answers in Genesis. Have you ever heard of that? Ken Ham is from Australia, immigrated to the United States, and created the Ark, the giant Ark Museum and the Christian Creation Museum. Some of the things that he has on his website really sparked a lot of interest in me. He talked about Noah's Ark. He talked about Mount St. Helens, which I actually got to watch blow up back in 1981. I was a young boy and saw that happen. The fact that there couldn't be death before sin, and that concept was interesting to me because I had to take that through when I was thinking about some of the other things. Talked about the Bible being the history book of the universe, and he also talked about the 7 C's of the world and of the history. And so the 7 C's made a lot of sense to me. I'm going to use a couple of those today, and I actually saw one of the speakers at one of our previous camps just recently that used them as well. So defining, what does apologetics actually mean? Anybody care to guess what they think apologetics means? A brave soul raise their hand and say, oh yeah, it means this. Not sure? When I first saw the word, okay, go back there. Yeah. Defending the faith. Yeah. Having an answer for those questions. Yeah, it's not just apologizing to everybody. Even though the word apology is in there, that comes from apogia, which is defending. All right, so defending one's faith. There's a couple of things you can look up online. Look in dictionaries. It says reasoned arguments or writings in justification of something, typically a theory or religious doctrine, a way of thinking. Apologetics is the religious discipline of defending religious doctrines through systematic argumentation and discourse. Early Christian writers who defended their beliefs against critics and recommended their faith to outsiders were called Christian apologists. All right? So if you are spending some time defending your faith, answering questions of maybe some friends of yours, you would be called an apologist. All right? Or simply having answers for the hope that lies within you. So the world today wants to tell you that you can't trust the Bible. That that all the things in the textbooks and your science books are true about the millions of years and evolution, and the Bible can't be true. It can't be trusted. Have you ever had questions about your faith personally? Yes. I think you're not human if you don't, right? We have to think about that. Has anyone ever asked you questions you couldn't answer about your faith that were just really hard? Yeah. There are some questions that are just kind of beyond our understanding, and you can't really come up with it. No matter how many times you've read the Bible and know how much faith you have, you're like, I really don't know. I can't wait to ask God someday when I get to heaven. I'm just not sure about that one. Where do you go for answers to your questions? What do you guys do? If you have questions, what do you do? Google it, right? Oh boy, you can get all kinds of fun answers on the internet. Some good, some not, right? What else could you do? Ask. Yeah, who would you ask? Elders? Okay, maybe elders at a church or something like that. Yeah, sure. A mentor of yours, something like that. Yeah. So that's kind of what I would recommend. You know, if you take away the Bible from your thinking, which a lot of people will tell you to do, oh, you can't trust the Bible, just take that away. Then you're taking away the very foundation that God has put in place for you to understand Him. There's a reason we have the Bible. It's the most reliable ancient document that exists in the world today. The sheer quantity of reliable manuscripts that are given has given the Bible much credibility, and the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the little caves has even strengthened that. They found all of these extra scrolls that just lined up with all the original manuscripts that they'd had from ancient times, and even gave them some more even older manuscripts. The book that I mentioned, The Case for Christ, goes into some great detail regarding that question. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. There's also some videos and things about it. One major argument against the historical validity of the Bible is based on the creation account. People look at that and think maybe it's just a fairy tale, right? It doesn't exist. The account encompasses only 2 chapters in a single book in a collection of 66 books, and a total of 1,189 chapters total in our Bible, right? So to discount the Bible and all of its content written by approximately 40 men spanning 1,500 years on the basis of the disbelief of the interpretation of just those 2 chapters is not a just argument. So if someone's just, that thing is, you can't trust the Bible because this, it's a pitiful attempt to disregard thousands of years of history. The Christian faith, although it does not hang on the creation account, though we believe God created the earth, a literal 6-day interpretation is not necessary to be a Christian. You don't have to believe that. It's not one of those close-handed beliefs. So there is some debate among the Christians as to whether it's a literal 6 days. Some Christians believe that the chapters are symbolic, not literal. But regardless of the essential belief of Christianity is that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, and not that God created the earth in 6 literal days. That being said, there are some excellent resources out there that do give a good case to the validity that the creation account is literal 6 days. And that Noah's Ark and the global flood, that dinosaurs are actually in the Bible, the age of the earth, and so much more. So pretty exciting to think about that, and to be even to be a Christian and to have the Bible that we have. So now what? Where do we go for more information, and what do we do about it? You guys had some thoughts and some ideas. I put up a couple of the things that I've used over the years. Of course, the Bible. If you read the Bible and become familiar with that, you're going to be much better to have answers for when people ask questions, right? If you don't read the Bible, you won't know what it says. And if you don't do it often, it won't stay in your heart and your mind. So memorizing Scripture and reading the Bible is going to be obviously the first thing to do. Answers in Genesis, AIG mentioned, The Case for Christ, the 180 movie, mentors, and prayer. So do your research, ask questions, get help from mentors, and just be curious. Pray and ask the Lord for help. Here these are a few resources I've used over the years, which have been really cool. The website, the AIG website, has thousands and thousands of articles, videos, and books that have been extremely helpful for me. I don't always agree with every viewpoint that Ken Ham has and his scientists, but they do have some great resources and do a great job of logically explaining many of the questions that I've had around the creation account, around Noah's Ark, the flood, dinosaurs, evolution, and more. The Case for Christ takes a solid look at the reliability of the Bible, eyewitness accounts, Jesus' medical information about his death and his resurrection, which I never really thought about before, but it's pretty cool. It was a fascinating read for me. The 180 movie, anybody seen the 180 movie? It's a little controversial, but it's pretty cool. It's about a half an hour long, and Ray Comfort does an interesting look on how quickly our minds can be changed about a topic just based on a few logical reasonings, and then living that logic out. He takes people who believe one thing at the beginning of his conversation, and then 90 seconds later they're actually going, oh, actually that makes a lot more sense than what I was thinking before. So pretty cool. So here are some common questions you may want to look up and find the answers to. I put them up here, just the things that I've been thinking about over the years. The worldwide flood one. What would the evidence be if there was a worldwide flood? As I was looking on answers in Genesis, they said billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth, a.k.a. fossils. And the way that the fossils are is actually a proof that there was a worldwide flood, the way that the fossils are all over the earth. And is there a God? I'd recommend Ken Ham's video, Science Confirms the Bible. He has a great video. It's about an hour and a half long, and he answers a lot of those difficult questions. He mentions in that video the verse Romans 1:21, and basically says it's obvious that there's a God. And with today's technology, it's becoming even more evident. Now we know that trillions of cells have DNA, and that all that information that is held within one strand of DNA could fill 1,000 books with 500 pages of information. And that's just in one strand of DNA that's inside of one of the trillions of cells that are in your body. So it's like this library of information, but you have to have a language to read it. It can't just be done by accident. He has some great pictures and stuff, which I stole one here to show you. It says, DNA contains information coded in the sequence of base pairs. The information can be compared to other forms of information like Morse code. How many of you know Morse code? Anybody? A little bit, yeah. So you recognize the dots up there? If you did not know Morse code and I didn't have the letters HELP up there, you might not be able to read that, right? Why? Because it's a different language, right? You don't have anything to break the code. So the thing about this is that there's no known natural laws that can explain how information can arise from random interactions of matter. So that random processes, you can't just get information to come out of that. The origin of information cannot be explained by evolution, that it just kind of happened by accident. You can see help up there. But if you had a rope with beads on it, and you could actually spell out words like that, you could write a whole book in Morse code. But only if you know the language, and the language requires intelligence and helps you crack the code. So DNA is like two ropes with beads that spell out all the information needed to build you, or to build a plant, or build someone else, right? So there's this book by Dr. Werner Gitt. He's an information scientist, and the book is called In the Beginning Was Information. And basically he says a code system is always the result of a mental process. So the fact that there's a DNA that makes up things means there's a mental process that had to be in place to make DNA. It couldn't just have happened by random processes. If life evolved, matter has produced code, matter has produced information, and codes don't come from chance random processes but from intelligence. So DNA is actually pointing to an infinite God, to a higher intelligence. God spoke and we existed. He created, he designed. Lower information creatures can't produce creatures with more information and so on. So-called evolution cannot create more complex organisms. Basically, a frog can never become a prince because the information for a man is not found in the DNA of a frog. And so no amount of mutation is going to produce a more complex information and therefore eventually become man. So let's take a look at a new topic. Dinosaurs. Anybody interested in dinosaurs? Maybe as a kid or something like that, you learned all the names of the dinosaurs. And for me, I was fascinated with dinosaurs. I wasn't obsessed, but I thought they were pretty cool. And I did wonder, why weren't there dinosaurs mentioned in the Bible? If it's supposed to be this, history book of the universe and all the things that are in there and the creation and all that, why isn't there dinosaurs in the Bible? So I did a bunch of research, and I actually ended up creating a little presentation that I gave at Awanas for kids. So I want you to imagine all that you're a group of kids that are in primary school, and you're interested in dinosaurs. So I'm going to actually show you the presentation that I showed to them to kind of give you an example of how you might use apologetics with kids. Okay? So enjoy. Get to be a kid again. All right, so dinosaurs in the Bible. And I gathered most of this from Answers in Genesis and my own studies as well. So how many of you have heard of evolution? Right? How many of you have heard the phrase millions of years? How many of you have heard that people came from monkeys or ape-like things? Right. You see, evolution talks about chance random processes over millions of years. That we came from slime and changed into amphibians, that changed into monkeys, that changed into humans. When I look at humans, I don't think of evolution and millions of years. I think of creation, an intelligent designer, our creator God. Let me give you an example. So look at this building. Did this building just happen? Did someone take a big pile of wood and metal and blow it up, and then it randomly fell into place? No. Somebody designed it and somebody else built it, right? There was plans that were put into place, thought processes. When you look at the earth, you can see that God designed and created it. All right, so let's get started. Pay close attention here. Today we're going to be talking about how dinosaurs can be explained using the Bible. The Bible has a lot of life's tough questions answered, like where did we come from? Where are we? Why are we here? And what's going to happen when we die? But it also tells us that it's the history book of the universe, right? The history of the universe. So let's all say this together. The history book of the universe. There we go. The history book of the universe. So that's a good thing to think about. I'm going to ask you a question. How old am I? How old do you think I am? Anybody want to give a guess? 45? 32? What'd you say? 39? Okay. Good. Pretty good guess. It's 54? Hey guys. Yeah, so how do you know how old I am? How would you know? How could you prove it? What? Oh, yeah, getting a little bit gray there, yeah. Yeah, you could make all kinds of guesses, but how could you prove it? What would you need? Well, so when I was born, there was a doctor and the nurses there, and they wrote down some information. They sent it to some state officials, and they made a birth certificate. So there you go. Born 1976, all right? So because of this document, I have proof of when I was born and where I was when I was born, Roseburg, Oregon, right, in Douglas County. So it can be trusted because it's an official document from the state of Oregon. And so I can use that officially. That's one of the ways I got my visa to get into New Zealand. So what is this? Yeah, it's the earth, right? So how can you tell how old it is just by looking at it? Yeah. Well, scientists say it's about 4.5 billion years old. And they base this off of evidence that they have found using dating processes that they have made based on things that they believe are accurate. Right? So they're doing their best job to date it, and they've come up with 4.6 billion-ish years, all right, around. So if you add up the ages of the people in the Bible and the generations from Adam to Christ, it's about 4,000 years. And it's been about 2,000 years since then. So some creation researchers say the earth is roughly 6,000 years old. All right, quite a bit different than the 4.6 billion. So let's take a look at this cartoon. It says, how can you believe the Bible? The Bible isn't reliable. Scientists have answers to show the Bible isn't true. Take the age of the earth. I go with people I can trust. Over the years, scientists have changed their idea of how old the earth is. But today, they say it's 4.5 billion years old. So when they discover new information, they end up changing their mind. On the other hand, the Bible never changes. So who do we believe? We read in the Old Testament that Job was talking to God, and he pointed out that Job wasn't there at the beginning when he laid the foundations of the earth. So the next time you hear a scientist say millions or billions of years, you might politely ask them the question, were you there? So say it together. Were you there? There we go. Of course, you want to be polite and kind, but that's a good question. And they might ask the same question back to you. Well, yeah, no, but were you there? And you could say, no, but I know somebody who was. And he wrote a book for us. It's called the Bible. So as we're looking at the same facts, whether you're looking at secular history or biblical history, you've got man's theories, you've got the Bible, and they're all going to look at the same thing, right? The dinosaurs, we've seen evidence of dinosaurs. We've got the bones, and we've got these different things that we can look at. Dinosaurs, according to evolutionists, were evolved around 235 million years ago, way before man existed. Right? They say that the dinosaurs ruled the earth around 65 million years ago, until 65 million years ago, when something happened to change all of this. Where'd I go? Sorry, just a second. There we go. To change all of this. And most evolutionists believe that some cataclysmic event destroyed the dinosaurs, or maybe it was an asteroid, or they evolved into birds and are flying around today. But there's no mystery surrounding the dinosaurs if you accept the Bible's totally different account of dinosaur history. So let's take a look at that. So Adam and Eve were made on day 6, right? Just like all the animals of the earth. And so according to the Bible, dinosaurs lived at the same time as people, not separated by eons of time. All right, so if you read in the Bible, it talks about how they were all created on that 6th day, the animals of the earth as well as the humans. So, boys and girls, since we're pretending to be a class of young kids, God created all kinds of animals, including elephants, giraffes, dogs, dinosaurs, and even the duck-billed platypus. God was very creative when he made the creatures and that were designed to do by him exactly what they were meant for. Have you ever seen a platypus before? Yeah? Yeah, they're pretty cool. I have a little video here. The platypus doesn't fit into the model of evolution. It's got hair like a bear. It's got webbed feet like an otter. It's got spurs on its legs like a rooster. It lays eggs like a turtle. It has poison like a snake. It has a bill like a duck, sonar like a submarine, and it has a tail like a beaver. It's all of these animals put into one. Pretty crazy. And so kids love songs, right? So I have a little song about the platypus that I think you might enjoy by Buddy Davis, a friend of Ken Ham.
Well, the Lord must have had a whole lot of fun when he took several critters and made them into one. He made the critter and put it in a river. It lives down under in Australia. It's designed to do what it does do. What it does do, it does do well, doesn't it? Yes, it does. I think it does. Do you? I do. Hope you do too. Do you? On day 6, God created it strange when he took this and that from several things. It's a mammal like a kangaroo. It has poison, sonar, and milk too. It's designed to do what it does do. What it does do, it does do well, doesn't it? Yes, it does. I think it does. Do you? I do. Hope you do too. Do you? I think the Lord laughed when he put on the fur. With the chuckle he gave it a rooster's spur. It's got a duck-like beak, a beaver's tail and feet, and it lays eggs down by the creek. It's designed to do what it does do. What it does do, it does do well, doesn't it? Yes, it does. I think it does. Do you? I do. Hope you do too, do you? It makes evolutionists scratch their heads. What on earth is that, they said? It's a platypus. What a grand design. It does what it does, and it does do fine. It's designed to do what it does do. What it does do, it does do well, doesn't it? Yes, it does. I think it does. Do you? I do. Hope you do too, do you?
Yeah, Buddy Davis has a bunch of little songs like that are fun for kids to learn and share, and I even saw some of you singing along, so good job. So how do we know that dinosaurs did not live and die millions of years before humans? That's a pretty big question that I've always had. Well, you see, we live in a fallen world. Before Adam and Eve sinned, death didn't exist. Death, bloodshed, disease, and suffering are a result of Adam's sin. When Adam and Eve took the fruit from the tree and disobeyed God, that's when death came into existence. Before that, there was no death. So think about that when you're thinking about dinosaurs living and dying before Adam and Eve. Doesn't fit within the biblical worldview. So after creation and the fall of man, people populated the earth and began to do things that were against God. It got so bad that God regretted even making humans. God found Noah and his family still wanted to follow him. And so God said that he was going to destroy the whole earth and that Noah should build an ark and take 2 of every kind of animal and 7 of some. And Noah pleaded with the people and gave them a way to be saved, much like Jesus would do on the cross over 2,500 years later. But they only made fun of Noah and were soon swallowed up with water and died along with all of the animals that remained on the earth. Some do not believe that this story is true, but science continues to find evidence that the flood. So there really was a worldwide flood, just like the Bible says. And if there was, what would the evidence be? What would we find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. So I'm going to show you another song, and you won't be able to help but sing along to this one. It's a catchy little tune. And the funny thing is, I don't know if you've been in Sunday school classes before, but usually they're cute little things, like a little ark that looks like a bathtub floating along and the giraffe's head sticking out the top. This song doesn't talk about that. So here you go. Billions of dead things buried by rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth.
The Bible talks about a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood. If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse, with billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. The Bible talks about Noah and the ark in a worldwide flood, where the world was judged. If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse, with billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. The Bible talks about a worldwide flood. Could the fossils be the proof we see? If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse. With billions of dead things buried in rock, there's 8 dumb water all over the earth.
All right, there you go. Cute little song. You won't be able to get that out of your head. You'll be singing it later. You're welcome. So you might ask, so why do evolution scientists and creation scientists look at the same dinosaur bones and yet come up with different ideas? The reason is, without God, scientists only have dinosaur bones. They weren't there when the dinosaurs were alive, so they had to come up with a story to explain where they came from. And their story changes as they find new evidence. All right? Every time they come up with something new, it's based on some new thing that they've discovered, and it sometimes disproves the things that they've said before, because they have to keep changing their mind as they go along. So you want to be careful when you hear somebody speaking about millions and billions of years and what the dinosaurs looked like and how they came to be and how they got destroyed. They will speak as if they were 100% sure, but they are not. That's the thing. The thing is they weren't there, right? So they're just basing it off of theories and ideas that they have based on what they can see, just like what you can see. They found these fossils, and they found these things, and they're evidence that they found. And they weave that into a story of what they think happened. And can you blame them? If you don't know that there's a God, or you don't think there's a God, you've got to come up with some sort of idea of what happened, right? So, for instance, a bone collector accidentally put a skull of one dinosaur on the skeleton of another dinosaur. He came up with a dinosaur that didn't even exist, the Brontosaurus. How many of you have heard of the Brontosaurus? That dinosaur never existed. It's easy to make mistakes when we don't have the whole story. We are human, after all, right? So that was the old head he put on the dinosaur, and then they found another one and actually found out he had the wrong dinosaur. He made up a new dinosaur that didn't exist, put the wrong head on the skeleton. So if people saw dinosaurs, you would think that the Bible would be in the Bible, right? They should mention them. So here's the deal. The King James Version was first translated from another language in 1611. All right, so that's when they first put the Bible into English. The word dinosaur didn't get invented till 1841. So when this guy, Sir Richard Owen, a famous British scientist, saw the bones of an iguanodon and a megalosaurus, and so he named them dinosaurs from the Greek words terrible, lizard. Right? So that's how we got the word dinosaur. So it makes sense that the Bible would not use the word dinosaur since the word wasn't a word yet. Right? Later we'll see what word it does use in the Bible. So looking back in the Bible, we can conclude that after the flood, the land animals, including dinosaurs, came off of the ark and lived in the present world along with people. Noah and his family repopulated the earth, but soon the people began to turn away from God, and they tried to build the Tower of Babel and reach to heaven on their own. So God confused their languages, and they spread out throughout the earth. This is when many of the different peoples of the human race were formed, like Eskimos, Aborigines, Africans, Indians, Europeans, and other. So these ancient people, as well as the animals, spread out on the earth using caves and anything else they could use to find for shelter. Today, we find drawings of dinosaurs and people together showing evidence that those ancient people saw and knew about dinosaurs. So what happened to the dinosaurs? Well, because of sin, post-flood weather changed. There was a lack of food, disease that entered in, and man began to kill animals and build cities. As a result, many types of animals became extinct. The dinosaur, like many other creatures, died out. So what happened to the dinosaurs? They died. Scientists say instead of a flood that dinosaurs died out by all kinds of other things like overeating or starvation or a big meteor that came down. But again, for that to be true, there would have to have been death before Adam and Eve and before sin. So, since dinosaurs were around with people, what word for dinosaur was used by the Bible, by the people in the Bible? The Bible says, "And God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, which the waters swarmed, and after their kind." The Hebrew word for sea monsters here is tanin, and is translated elsewhere as dragon. The dragon, there are dragon legends from around the world, and many dragon descriptions sound just like what we now call dinosaurs. There are other passages in the Bible that talk about dragons that lived in the sea. The dragons in the water in Psalms. And he will slay the dragon that is in the sea in Isaiah. Job 41 describes a great animal that lived in the sea, the Leviathan, that even breathed fire. This dragon may have been something like the mighty 40-foot super croc. There is also mention of a flying serpent in the Bible, the fiery serpent in Isaiah. This could be in reference to one of the pterodactyls, which many call flying dinosaurs. So, since dinosaurs were with people here, let's take a look at another passage here. What about Behemoth in Job 40? Some say that the creature Behemoth is an elephant or a hippo, but I don't think that's the case. The verse says, "He moves his tail like a cedar, and the sinews of his thighs are tightly knit." Does that look like a tail of a cedar tree to you? Maybe the ones above, the cartoons, but not the actual tails. So how about the mighty Apatosaurus? Does that fit the description? That's the one that they thought was the Brontosaurus. Has anybody ever seen a dinosaur bone? Like maybe been to a museum or something like that? So do the bones, when you dig them up, have labels on them and tell you how old they are? No. That'd be really cool if they did, but they don't. Scientists, unlike the Bible, have to constantly change their beliefs based on the new evidence that comes out. In fact, in 1991, a scientist was baffled when they found red blood cells in a T-Rex bone. That was dated 65 million years old. Now they have to completely relook at fossilization, and I believe they'll soon find that the red blood cells cannot last that long. So their science is off on how old things are. So when it comes to trusting scientists or trusting God, who should we choose? God, right? He was there in the beginning. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our class on apologetics today. If you have yet to put your faith in God and accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, I hope you'll do that soon. God is the only one who we can really trust in our life. Thank you. So we're officially out of time right now, but I think we have about 15 minutes. And if you guys have any questions or thoughts about what you just saw, I'd love to talk about that. Or if you have any other questions too, I'll do my best to answer. I am not the Bible answer man, but I do have some answers. So any questions, any things you've been thinking about? What was it about this class that piqued your interest? What were you wanting to know? Yeah. Yeah.
What about like Neanderthals?
Yeah. So I mentioned that a little bit in here, but the cave drawings, right, that we saw, those were most likely after the Tower of Babel, when there was confusion because of language. They were spread out through the whole earth, and they were trying to figure out where to find shelter. They didn't have homes, anything like that, so they lived in caves for a while, and that's when they started drawing on the caves and things like that. And they were also learning a new language that they had just been given and trying to communicate with the others around them. So they probably used those cave drawings to communicate with one another. Yeah. Good question, though. Does that help answer your question? Yeah. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Yeah.
The living in the caves, they can have thicker foreheads or something?
Yeah, it's a good question about that. The heads and things, the fossils that we find where they have different shaped heads. I mean, if you look around at the human race right now, there's different shaped heads right now. There's different, even some cultures put like boards on their foreheads to flatten their forehead because it's considered beautiful in that. Or they'll put rings on their neck and stretch out their neck so they're really tall and long. So my guess would be the ones that they found were either a mutation that happened or something culturally like that, where they actually changed their skulls from a very young age. There's a real possibility of that. Also, some of those skulls could have been a different species of creature, that was like a monkey or an ape or something like that. Not necessarily an evolution of something, but just a different one that no longer exists. That's my best guess, my best answer. I wasn't there, so I don't know. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. How many of you have had any experience answering questions some of your friends? And what did you do?
Oh, you just kind of like try to explain it as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of questions have you had? Do you remember?
I've had like people trying to ask me to explain like the Holy Spirit, the whole Trinity thing.
Yeah.
And like to explain the beginning and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's tough. Yeah. Trinity is kind of beyond our brains, isn't it? 3 in 1. Yeah. I've heard different analogies that they pretty much fall apart when you fall through on them, but at least gives you a basic idea. Like the egg has the egg, the yolk, the white, and the shell. It's like 3 in 1. This is an egg, but it has 3 parts. I've heard that, but it's like, okay, yeah, that sort of makes sense. It sort of helps, but it doesn't really give that spiritual sense of what it is. And yeah, those are tough. And then the whole beginning part, talking about creation, that can be confusing for some. But some people, even Christians, will believe that it's a young earth, that it was literal 6 days, and others will, oh no, there's millions of years in between there, and you work it out. And if you look at Ken Ham, he hates that people would think that, because it kind of messes up some of our future logic and thinking on the way things go, especially that whole thing about death before sin. That one for me was like mind-blowing to think about, because if you really do believe that the Bible is true and that there was no death before sin, you can't have millions of years between dinosaurs and man. It doesn't line up. It doesn't work. So whenever you try to take a theory and then see if you can squish it into the Bible, you're going to have trouble with that. But if you start with the Bible and then base your theories off of that, then it'll actually make sense and work out in the biblical worldview. Good questions. Any other interactions you've had over the years where you've had people ask you questions?
I've got another question.
Oh, you got another question? Okay, great.
So before the fall, do you think animals are different because they've got like really sharp teeth?
Yeah, good question. Possibly, but not necessarily, because have you ever heard of the fruit bat?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Does the fruit bat have sharp teeth? Yes, it does. Yeah, very sharp teeth. Does it eat meat? Nope. So just because something has sharp teeth doesn't mean it can't eat just vegetables, right? But I think God probably protected Adam and Eve beforehand with all these crazy animals that are around that could probably eat them, and gave them the ability to live in harmony. And then after the fall and after the flood, things might have changed. Yeah. My question was, how do you fit dinosaurs on the ark? Babies, exactly. Or an egg, even. Yeah. Pretty cool. And when I first thought of the ark, I always thought of it as a tiny little boat, but it's huge. Like, it would go from the driveway where you first come in and probably come all the way to here. And it's like a 9-story building and like just huge, long, wide thing. You could fit 522 train cars that you stack animals and stuff inside of the ark. It's a lot of space. Yeah, and they could have storage for water and food and all these animals, and have a space in the middle that was super tall for if you had a tall dinosaur or something like that living in there. Yeah, it's very possible. Pretty crazy to think about. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close this in prayer and let you guys get out of here if you want to, and you can hang around and chat if you want to. I think the next thing's at 12:30, right? I think so. I'll look at it in a minute. Heavenly Father, I thank you for the time we've had today to look at apologetics and look at the Bible, look at dinosaurs, and all the questions that we might have and that others might have. Father, I just pray for wisdom and for guidance for all of us, Lord, as we want to answer those questions that are difficult and have friends and family who may not be a Christian and may not believe in who God is, and just have some stumbling blocks that are in their way. Lord, I pray that you help us find the answers that we need to give them, but ultimately that we ourselves, our story, could be that evidence that they can see that God is real and that he changes lives, just like he did for my dad and for all my brothers and sisters and my family. And Lord, we thank you for the blessing of this beautiful place at Totara Springs and all the friends that we have here. And just pray for an excellent rest of our day and our time here. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thank you guys, and have a great rest of your day.